something, especially for that time period.
Completely. And I mean, I think the other part about metal is that as scary as metal is also really campy at the same time. At this point, Black Sabbath still kind of look like a boy band too. So it's like you have these sounds that feel like they're scraped from the middle of the earth, really coming to the forefront to define the sort of trajectory of metal in the 20th century.
Now, Nico, Melissa mentioned Ozzy's voice, and you can't get away from it. It is that the moment you hear it, it's singular. But it comes from Birmingham, working class roots. I mean, this is a guy, he was caught up in burglary, all sorts of mischief. Do you hear that when you listen to him sing? Can you hear that in his vocals?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the best voices are ones that have that sort of texture that, like a good voice tells a story and it tells sort of where it's been. And I saw a tweet the other day where somebody was like, Ozzy kind of sounds like if you were at a club and you ran out into the street and you found a guy on the street and you said, you get on stage, you sing right now, having no sense of what he's going to do. There's kind of that sort of like urgency to it a little bit. And it is for sure, like Ozzy had a very working class background. He grew up in Birmingham. His voice really tells a story of where he came from, this working class background. And like Melissa was saying, like these, blues music and these roots that sort of build them up. And it is this very learned thing that you can't teach and you can't hone it and you can't force yourself to sound like that. It is a very authentic thing, which is, the best voices always do. It's a harder thing to come by now. Like you can't imagine one of the biggest bands in the world having somebody on stage who's maybe not like a quote unquote technically great singer, but is a beautiful singer whose voice always tells a story. And those songs come alive because of Ozzy's voice. Ozzy's voice is so at the forefront of it all. And it is partially that it's that working class background. It's that, going to jail when he was younger and all of these things that built him up, the sexual abuse that he would talk about later, all these things build up that voice. It's such a unique thing that we have lost the voice of Ozzy that like, even if you're not a big Sabbath person, you hear it, you know what it is. Mm-hmm. That's the mark of like something really beautiful left in this world is if you hear it, it's immediately recognizable. You know what it is.
From that first syllable, undoubtedly. Well, let's hear that voice, but that voice talking, alluding to one of the stories that Melissa was sharing. Here is Ozzy talking to Tom Power on Q a few years ago.
We used to rehearse across the road from a movie theatre, and there was a horror film on, and somebody said, isn't it weird that people pay money to see movies to scare them? Why don't we start writing scary music? And that's basically how the satanic thing happens.
So there it is. Why don't we start writing scary music? Danko, remind us, how scary was Black Sabbath?
Yeah, I mean, they were coming out of the hippie era and tie-dye and everybody was peace and love. And then these four guys who look like warlocks. I mean, those early photos are even scary today. Tony Iommi looked like he cut his own hair without a mirror, but that's beside the point. The down tuning on the guitar and that devil note that everybody talks about, that Sabbath's kind of kicked a whole genre, that tritone devil note, and the down tuning, I think in terms of the sound, that had a lot to do with what scared a lot of people.
I mean, Danko, I'm curious as a musician, like, what do you think of a band that deliberately set out to unsettle people, to make them not feel necessarily great or happy, but to pull other emotions out from them?
Well, I think you're trying to get a reaction no matter what you're doing, even if you're playing an acoustic guitar. And I think somewhere around that time, of a period of about 5 years there, they stumbled on it, and you got Kiss, you got Sabbath, you got Zeppelin, and you got the Dolls, and then eventually you got the Pistols, and it was all about getting a reaction, and the more extreme and the more extreme, the more reaction, and eventually you're biting the head off a bat and a dove.
Yep.
And, and here we are.
Here we are.
2025, yeah.
All right, well, let's go back to the music. Here is another classic tune, Paranoid. I mean, I'm banging my head here in the studio. Melissa, the lyrics, happiness I cannot feel, and the love to me is so unreal. Some dark stuff there. Why did this song blow up?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I think Danko, you were mentioning this feeling of like what it means to cause a reaction. And I think that extreme music across all genres, it's really uniquely capable of shining a light on things that people feel. Sometimes they feel in ways that resonate in the body, but there's no way for them to articulate it in words. I mean, a lot of metal does that through screaming, and even when screaming is tonally impossible to understand, somebody can capture the feeling of anguish or despair with a really like razor thin point of precision. But I think Paranoid, which like on the surface, one of the most recognizable riffs of the 20th century, I feel like it functions like this car that is like revving its engine. And I feel like part of what makes it so appealing is there's something this the song is teasing you in a way. It's sort of like, do you want to go further? Do you want to go heavier? Do you want to go more extreme? But it delivers these payoffs throughout where the entire thing clocking in at just like a little over 2 minutes. It is like a barn burner, but it also is one that just displays this ear for melody. I think we get this real sense of how dynamic Ozzy is as a vocalist, where at the same time there's a grit. There's also, to Nico's point, there's the sense of poetry where it's really difficult to tell where the line between the protagonist and antagonist ends, especially if he's talking about something that feels like it's so evil. So I think as much as it's a look, it's an external look, it's also an internal one too. And I think repeated listens bring a lot of very different meanings to the forefront. And I can imagine when that song shot to number 4 on the UK charts, everything around it would have sounded really different. But at the same time, whoever got their hands on a copy of the record around the world individually kickstarted scenes that almost unanimously credit that moment in metal history as a launch point to metal in Brazil, metal in Canada, metal in Japan. So
Just a chain reaction. Now, we can't talk about the music without the antics. So, Danko, you're a bit of a showman yourself, but do you have a favorite Ozzy Osbourne story?
I mean, we've all heard the stories about him biting off the heads of doves and bats and snorting ants with Motley Crue. But really,
I just got to get the image out of my head. Sorry.
Sorry, did I just say that as if it was no big deal?
Yeah, it's okay.
It's probably because I've heard those stories over and over again. But when I was a kid in a school bus, I think I was in grade 3 or 4. I think it was the Diary of a Madman album that Ozzy had played. I can't remember how old I was, but I remember one of the kids in the school bus brought like a Toronto Star review of the show. We were passing around crazy stories about Ozzy. That laid the foundation for me that this guy was the craziest guy in music. And even though later on he became part of pop culture, where even my mom was saying that Ozzy Osbourne's great because she had seen the show, he always, to me, remained the scariest guy and the coolest guy in rock and roll. And it's because of those school bus rides when I was in grade 3 or 4, where the myth of Ozzy Osbourne just took on another life of itself. So I don't really have a real, actual story, because the real stories would probably trump mine. But
you're speaking to the effect. I mean, you bought into this vision of this like demonic rock creation, and that endured and inspired. Now, Nico, if we can go back to music, I mean, Ozzy, we started at Black Sabbath, then he goes solo. Do you see his influence in the music scene today?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like you can kind of feel Ozzy and everything. You know, he is sort of emerging right at the right time, right? You know, he's this sort of grandfather of heavy metal. He's emerging at the same time as like we're seeing the Stooges and we're seeing stuff like that. And this really sort of like taking this kind of bold aggressiveness. And also, well, like if you look at Paranoid and that sort of era, a lot of these songs are, you know, they're a little bit more introspective in their own way. And it is taking this idea of like having a little bit more of a personal tale, but also like turning into this loud, bold thing. And it is like there are shades of it in everything. And, you know, like I think if a lot of people boiled themselves down to their core components, there's going to be some Ozzy in there, regardless of what they're playing, just because it is so formative. It is so inescapable. Ozzy, rest in peace. He's still going to be a formative person for people for decades to come.
Melissa, where do you see those seeds of Ozzy bearing fruit today?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, as Nico said, we see it just across the 20th century and 21st century of popular music. But I think we see metal. And again, if we think about, there's a little bit of Black Sabbath and everything kind of going through these ebbs and flows. We see this big ebb throughout the 80s with hair metal. We see a little bit of a dip in the early 90s with grunge, even though I have like a real soft spot for like early 90s Ozzy. He has like a very sweet grunge adjacent record that I think always deserves a few more flowers. Then we see the rise of new metal, but I think even in the 1% of pop artists throughout the 2010s and even into the 2020s, like Justin Bieber had a really well-known metal artist design the logo for his Purpose tour. We see Rihanna flirting with a lot of metal aesthetics. Throughout hip hop, horrorcore comes to the forefront. There is like just blood and guts all around, and people really exploring darker themes, thinking about what if we put a really heavy, really grotesque bass line at the sort of subsection of what otherwise would be a really beautiful pop song. And I think listeners have an appetite because music is passed down generationally, and even if you don't know that you have an appetite for heavy music, it might be in there somewhere. And sometimes it takes the right pop song to blend some of those elements together. And even a Canadian artist like Backwash, who famously sampled Black Sabbath on the, you know, around the title track of a record, which just really gave context to how many different ways you can translate the feeling of a song to ensure that it can match a really specific personal position and give it a new set of wings for a different community of artists.
So interesting to see the multiplying effects of metal. I'm Eli Glasser sitting in for Elamine Abdel Mahmoud. This is Commotion. Danko Jones, Melissa Vincent, Nico Stratus are all here to talk about the legacy of Ozzy Osbourne. Now, Ozzy became famous in a different way in the early 2000s when he starred in his family's reality show, The Osbournes. Let's take a listen to this classic moment in UK television.
Ozzy, there you go. Look. Tiny bubbles.
Bubbles! Get the bubbles. Come on, Sharon. I'm Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness.
You couldn't deliver that line better. Nico, how did this reality show give us another side of Ozzy?
I want to say soften, but it didn't soften necessarily, but it humanizes him in this way wherein, you know, before he's this sort of otherworldly figure that you conjure, you know, like Ozzy as a name is just this vision you imagine as like some figure sort of skulking in the darkness somewhere. And then suddenly he's on TV and he's got all these dogs and he's got this family in this home. And like, you know, my sister and I, we were in our, you know, this is early 2000s. So I was in my 20s at the time, which I don't like to think about too much if I go down that road too far. But like, you know, it would be on TV and we would just sort of sit down and pick it up. And this is well before this idea of like putting cameras in rich people's houses and seeing what they're up to. And it did sort of turn him into this real life person. Whereas before my entire life, he was just Ozzy. He was just a guy that I never imagined was real in the way that he was real in the show. You know, he's at home, he's cooking breakfast, he's spending time with his family. There's bubbles. He's worried about being the Prince of Darkness. Like all of these things, it just created this other layer of him that didn't at the time feel as forced as it does now with these kinds of shows. And even looking back, you're like, okay, I can see the strings now. The artifice is much more at the forefront. But at the time, it was just like, it was such an unimaginable thing that you just couldn't help but watch it.
Danko, How did that show change reality TV? Do you think it had an impact?
Well, first of all, I was totally against it when I first saw it. I thought the veil had been pulled from my childhood, and I didn't want to see the wizard behind it. So but I couldn't take my eyes off it. And I remember JC, our bass player, he downloaded some of the episodes, and we were on tour, and I think we were in like a McDonald's or a Burger King, and we just watched it there. I couldn't believe that this had been exposed. I was dead against it, but again, I watched every episode, so it is what it is. Sorry, what was your question, Eli? Because I wanted to get that in there.
No, I appreciate the way that you were like against it and then you pulled in like so many did. And because of that, do you think like can we put the Kardashians on the Osbournes? Like what was the effect of this show?
Oh, yeah. It created reality TV. I mean, it solidified it, I think, right? With American Idol and Survivor. I mean, it just became Ozzy's credited with starting heavy metal, and he kind of can be credited with starting reality TV. And I don't know if I like that.
Yeah.
I like my Ozzy scary to scare the living crap out of me. And I don't kind of want to meet him. And when we did play with him, I was not in any hurry to meet him. We played with him 4 times. I never met him at the show. He walked by me in the hallway once when we played with him in Paris. But I met him at a record store I used to work at on Yonge Street.
Remarkable. Before we let you all go, we need to hear your favorite songs. I want a recommendation from each. So, Danko, not an easy task. Your favorite Ozzy Osbourne song.
Does that include Black Sabbath?
Sure, man.
Thrill of It All off Sabotage, because 1 minute in, Ozzy delivers the best yeah in rock and roll.
Nice.
Better than Roger Daltrey, better than Outkast, better than She Loves You, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the best.
Better than Outkast. All right, I've got to go check that out. Nico.
I'm going to go with the first one I ever heard, which is Paranoid. I stole my dad's copy of the record, and it's the one I still have in my collection. And I just remember putting that on and being like, oh, okay, so everything's just different now. This is good to know. It's nice when your life changes forever. And so that's always sort of going to be the one that I hold on to.
Beautiful.
Cool dad.
My parents both, shout out to my parents if you're listening to this. I often forget to tell them when I'm doing radio, but my parents both were music people. They grew up in Vancouver, and they both, independently of each other, were at the same Black Sabbath concert and didn't know. It was before they started dating. And then later when they were like, oh, I've been to this show, I've been to this show. They both happened to be at the same Black Sabbath concert and didn't know it. And if you ever meet my mom, you will be very surprised to know that she was at a Black Sabbath concert. But my parents are cool as hell.
There you go.
Cool mom, too.
Respect.
Yeah, I know, but yeah.
All right, Melissa, end it up for us.
Yeah, I think mine has to be Desire from his 1991 album, No More Tears. And I mean, I just think, we've been talking, I don't know how many times we've said Prince of Darkness in this single conversation, but this one track, I feel like it's so playful and cheeky, and he is sort of shirtless on the cover. And when he's talking about desire, I feel like he's selling it as something that exists for everybody. And it's a desire in the vein of Audre Lorde talking about the uses of the erotic. It's a different form of desire that I think Ozzy's really demanding for. It's really demanding for himself. And I just think there's a really beautiful, like poetic injunction in terms of how we might think of Black Sabbath and what that record and what that particular song means in terms of something that stands out where he's really experimenting with something different.
Amazing. I'm going to give a shout out to the epic length of No More Tears. Just an amazing, amazing track. Love the intro, love the synth, love everything. And I love this conversation. You've broadened my idea of Ozzy Osbourne. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thanks
so much for having us.
Thank you.
Crazy.
That is Melissa's pick from the 1991 album No More Tears. That's Desire by Ozzy Osbourne. And before that, you heard part of our conversation on Ozzy with Danko Jones, Nico Stratus, and Melissa Vincent. You can hear a longer version of that chat on the podcast or on YouTube. Danko Jones is the frontman of the Toronto hard rock group Danko Jones. He's on a European tour right now. We caught up with him in Helsinki. Nico Stratus is the author of The Dad Rock That Made Me a Woman. She lives in Toronto. Melissa Vincent is a music journalist from Toronto and a PhD researcher in the media department at the London School of Economics in England. Earlier, you heard a bit from Tom Power's 2022 interview with Ozzy Osbourne. If you want to catch the full conversation, head over to the Q podcast. I'm Eli Glasner sitting in for Elamine Abdel Mahmoud. See you tomorrow.
You're listening to CBC Radio 1, 95.1 FM in Nain.
If it happened today, find out today. That's the power of having the news in your hand. Get late-breaking news from reporters across the country, straight to your mobile device. Customize your experience with news from your region and what matters to you. Whether it's big headlines, detailed articles, live events, or on-demand video, CBC News has got you covered. Connect to the world. Download the free CBC News app or visit cbcnews.ca.
Hi, I'm Saroja Coelho, host of the Saturday afternoon call-in show, Just Asking.
And I'm Ian Hannamansing, host of the Sunday afternoon call-in show, Cross Country Checkup.
Whether it's world events
or what's happening in your backyard,
every weekend we connect Canada live.
That's Just Asking with Saroja Coelho, Saturday afternoons at 4 Eastern.
And Cross Country Checkup with Ian Hannamansing, Sunday afternoons at 4 Eastern on CBC Radio 1.
The CBC News is next, followed by Ideas with Nala Ayed.
During her extraordinary life, Mitiarjuk Napalak wrote more than 20 books in Inuktitut. She was also a teacher, an artist, and a thinker with profound ideas about justice and community. That's coming up on Ideas.
From CBC News, The World This Hour, I'm Gina Louise Phillips. In London, Ontario, all 5 former World Junior Hockey players have been found not guilty. Michael McLeod, Carter Hart, Alex Fermenton, Dylan Dubé, and Callan Foote were accused of sexually assaulting a young woman in a hotel room in 2018. Lawyers for the defendants praised the judge's rulings, and several criticized the Crown for proceeding with the case at all. Daniel Brown represented Alex Fermenton.
The London police got it right 7 years ago when they decided it would be a mistake to charge Alex. Political and media pressure brought this allegation back into the spotlight in 2022, and the Crown attorney knowingly forged ahead with a hopeless prosecution.
The lawyer for the victim, EM, Karen Belhumer, says she is deeply disappointed in the rulings and in the judge for not believing her client.
Her treatment during cross-examination at times was insulting, unfair, mocking, and disrespectful, none of which was necessary. Yet she maintained her composure and kept her emotions in check, only to be criticized for not acting enough like a victim.
The Crown is considering whether to appeal the rulings. Inuit leaders are giving their conditional approval to Ottawa's major projects bill. It comes as a result of a meeting with Prime Minister Mark Carney in Nunavut. David Thurton reports.
All right.
Going into the meeting, Inuit leaders sought assurances Bill C-5 won't allow the Crown to sidestep its duty to consult with Indigenous peoples. Ottawa's legislation to build big things and fast offers upfront approvals to projects deemed to be of national importance. Prime Minister Mark Carney addressed those concerns.
C-5 fully respects all treaty rights, modern treaty rights, and environmental assessments.
At the end of the meeting, Inuit leaders said they were satisfied with Carney's assurances. Natan Obed is president of Inuit Tapiri Kanatami.
We've had reassurances that the Bill C-5, the legislation, and the listed projects related to the implementation of Bill C-5 will not interrupt the processes under our modern treaties.
Inuit leaders admit the North has massive infrastructure gaps. They want those addressed, but on their terms. David Thurton, CBC News, Inuvik.
Rescue efforts are underway for 3 workers who are trapped in a mine in northern British Columbia. In a statement, the operator of the Red Chris mine says a remote-controlled scoop is beginning to remove a pile of debris about 20 to 30 meters long and 7 to 8 meters high. The contractors were trapped 2 days ago.